Captain Elena Vasquez stood alone on the observation deck of the United Earth ship Horizon. The stars stretched before her like scattered diamonds on black velvet. She had always loved this view, but tonight it brought her no peace. In 3 hours, she would face the largest alien armada ever assembled in known space. The fate of humanity rested on her shoulders, and she felt the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on her. Behind her, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Commander James Chen, her second in command, walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her without a word. They had served together for 15 years, and sometimes words were not needed. "The crew is ready," James finally said. "Scared but ready." Elena nodded. "Fear is natural, it keeps us sharp. Some of them are writing letters home, just in case." "Let them," Elena replied. "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That is the human way." The journey to this moment had been long and strange. First contact had happened only 20 years ago, when humanity sent its first faster-than-light probe into deep space. What they found was not a silent universe but a crowded one. The galaxy teemed with intelligent life, organized into dozens of species and hundreds of civilizations. The Galactic Collective, as they called themselves, had watched humanity for centuries, waiting to see if they would destroy themselves or reach the stars. Humanity had surprised them. Despite their wars, despite their conflicts, despite coming close to extinction more than once, humans had survived. They had learned. They had grown. And when they finally reached out to the stars, they came not as conquerors but as students, eager to learn and share. The first decade of contact had been filled with wonder and discovery. Humans learned about species that breathed methane, species that lived in the vacuum of space, species that existed as collective minds spread across entire planets. They traded knowledge and culture. They made friends and allies. Earth became a hub of activity, its ports welcoming ships from 100 worlds. But not everyone welcomed humanity's arrival. The Vorthan Empire had ruled a quarter of the known galaxy for 10,000 years. They were ancient, powerful, and they saw humanity as a threat. Not because humans were strong, but because they were different. Where the Vorthan believed in order and hierarchy, humans believed in change and adaptation. Where the Vorthan saw weakness in emotion, humans found strength in it. The first attack came without warning. 3 human colony ships, carrying 10,000 people each, were destroyed on the edge of Vorthan space. The Empire claimed they were trespassing, that the destruction was necessary to maintain order. The Galactic Collective condemned the attack but did nothing more. They feared the Vorthan too much to act. Elena remembered that day clearly. She had been a lieutenant then, serving on a patrol ship near Mars. The news had hit like a physical blow. 30,000 people, gone in an instant. Families, children, hopes and dreams, all reduced to floating debris. She had sworn that day that she would never let it happen again. In the years that followed, Elena rose through the ranks. She studied Vorthan tactics, learned their language, understood their culture. She knew that war was coming. The Vorthan did not tolerate what they could not control, and humanity refused to be controlled. When the Collective appointed her as Earth's military representative, she accepted the burden without hesitation. Now, 20 years after first contact, the moment she had prepared for had arrived. The Vorthan had assembled a fleet of 2,000 warships. They called it a peacekeeping force, but everyone knew its true purpose. They intended to subjugate humanity, to force them into the rigid structure of the Empire. Any resistance would be met with complete annihilation. Earth's fleet numbered only 300 ships. They were outgunned, outmanned, and outmatched in every measurable way. The Galactic Collective had offered sympathy but not support. They were willing to watch humanity fall rather than risk their own destruction. "Tell me again why we are not running," James said, staring at the stars. Elena smiled. It was a question she had asked herself many times. Because running is not who we are. We stood against ice ages and plagues. We survived world wars and near extinction. Our ancestors crossed oceans in wooden boats and walked on the moon with primitive rockets. Humans do not surrender. We adapt. We fight. We find a way. Those are pretty words, James said, but words will not stop Vorthan plasma cannons. No, they will not, but courage will, determination will. The willingness to sacrifice everything for what we believe in, that is our weapon. That is what they do not understand about us. The comm unit on Alina's belt chirped. She pressed the button and listened to the report. The Vorthan fleet had entered the solar system. They were 4 hours away and closing fast. Time to go, she said, setting down her coffee cup. Sound general quarters. I want all ships in formation within the hour. As they walked to the bridge, Alina thought about everything that had led to this moment. The wars of Earth's past had taught humanity hard lessons about conflict. They had learned that strength alone was not enough. Victory required strategy, unity, and most importantly, the courage to stand when others would kneel. The bridge of the horizon was a hive of activity. Officers moved between stations, running final checks and confirming readiness. On the main view screen, Alina could see Earth hanging in space, a blue and green jewel against the blackness. Her home, her responsibility. She took her place in the captain's chair and opened a channel to the fleet. 300 ships, crewed by 50,000 brave souls, waited for her words. This is Captain Vasquez. In a few hours, we will face the greatest challenge in human history. The enemy believes they have already won. They look at our numbers and see easy prey. They look at our history and see a species still learning to walk among the stars. But they are wrong. She paused, letting her words sink in. They do not know what we know. They do not understand what we understand. We are human. We have faced extinction before and survived. We have turned disaster into triumph, weakness into strength. When we stand together, nothing in this universe can break us. Across the fleet, men and women listened. Some were soldiers, trained for this moment. Others were scientists, engineers, doctors, pressed into service by necessity. All of them were human, and all of them understood what was at stake. Today we show the galaxy who we are. Not conquerors, not victims, but survivors, fighters, humans. And when this day is done, the Vorthan will learn a lesson they will never forget. Do not threaten Earth. Do not underestimate humanity. We are small, but we are mighty. We are young, but we are determined. And we will never, ever give up. She closed the channel and turned to James. Take us to the front line. The horizon moved forward, leading the fleet toward destiny. Behind them, Earth glowed softly in the darkness. Ahead, 2,000 alien warships waited. And in between, 300 human vessels prepared to make their stand. Alina watched the approaching armada on her tactical display. Each red dot represented a ship capable of devastating entire continents. Together, they could burn Earth to ash. But she felt no despair, only determination, only the fierce will to protect everything she loved. The Vorthan had made a mistake. They thought numbers meant everything. They thought fear would break humanity before the first shot was fired. But humans had something the Vorthan did not. They had each other. They had hope. And they had a captain who would rather die than surrender. The final countdown began. In 3 hours, the battle for Earth would start. In 3 hours, history would be written. And Captain Alina Vasquez intended to make sure it was a history that humanity could be proud of. The Vorthan fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a swarm of metal locusts. 2,000 ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns, their dark hulls absorbing light instead of reflecting it. At the center of the formation sat the flagship, the Eternal Dominion, a vessel so massive it could swallow the horizon whole. On the bridge of the Dominion, Supreme Commander Zareth studied the human fleet with cold, calculating eyes. His species had evolved from apex predators on a world of constant warfare. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in armored scales, their faces dominated by 4 eyes that could see in every spectrum of light. Only 300 ships, his tactical officer reported. They are either brave or foolish. Both, Zareth replied. That is the nature of humans. They feel emotions so strongly that it blinds them to reality. They actually believe they can win. Should we offer them one final chance to surrender? Zareth considered the question. Vorthan tradition demanded that inferior species be given the opportunity to submit. It was not mercy. It was efficiency. Why waste ammunition on enemies willing to kneel? Open a channel to their flagship, he ordered. On the horizon, Alina watched as the Vorthan hail came through. She straightened in her chair and accepted the transmission. The view screen flickered, and then she was face to face with Zareth. Human Commander, the alien said, his voice deep and resonant. I am Supreme Commander Zareth of the Vorthan Empire. You face a fleet that has conquered 100 worlds. Your defeat is certain. I offer you one chance. Surrender now, and your people will be allowed to live as subjects of the Empire. Refuse, and we will destroy your fleet, burn your cities, and enslave those who survive. Alina let the words hang in the air. Around her, the bridge crew watched in tense silence. She knew they were waiting for her response, looking to her for guidance. This was the moment that would define everything. Supreme Commander, she began, her voice calm and steady. I appreciate your offer, but I am afraid I must decline. You see, humans have a problem with authority. We do not like being told what to do, and we really do not like being threatened. Zareth's 4 eyes narrowed. This was not the response he had expected. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, collapsed into begging and pleading. But this human showed no fear, no hesitation. You are making a mistake, he said. Your fleet cannot possibly win. Alina smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Maybe not, but that is not the point. The point is that we will fight anyway. We will make you bleed for every inch of space you take. We will make this victory cost you so much that you will question whether it was worth it. And even if you destroy us today, you will never destroy the idea of us. Other species are watching. They see a small, young race standing against the mighty Vorthan Empire. Win or lose, we have already changed everything. For a long moment, Zareth said nothing. He had conquered dozens of worlds, crushed countless rebellions, but he had never encountered anything quite like this. There was something in the human's eyes that unsettled him. Not fear, not resignation, but something that looked almost like joy, as if she welcomed the coming battle. So be it, he finally said. Your species will be remembered as a cautionary tale. Oh, we will be remembered, Alina replied, but not as a cautionary tale, as an inspiration. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. Battle stations, all ships engage on my command. The human fleet moved into formation. They had trained for this moment for years, drilling tactics and strategies that no other species had ever attempted. The Vorthan relied on overwhelming force. They did not adapt. They did not improvise. Their tactics had not changed in millennia because they had never needed to change. Humans were different. They had learned warfare through trial and error, through victories and defeats, through constant evolution. They understood that the smaller force could defeat the larger one through cunning, speed, and the willingness to take risks. First wave launch, Alina ordered. From the human ships, thousands of small craft erupted into space. These were not fighters in the traditional sense but drones, unmanned vessels packed with explosives. They raced toward the Vorthan fleet at incredible speed, too small and too fast to be easily targeted. The Vorthan responded with withering fire. Plasma bolts filled space like a deadly rain. Hundreds of drones were destroyed in the first seconds, but hundreds more got through. They struck the Vorthan shields in waves, each impact weakening the protective barriers. Shields are holding, Zareth's tactical officer reported. Damage is minimal. They are testing our defenses, Zareth said. Probing for weaknesses. It is a standard tactic. They will learn nothing. But he was wrong. The drones were not just weapons. Each one carried sensors that transmitted data back to the human fleet. In seconds, Alina's tactical team had a complete map of Vorthan shield frequencies, weapon placements, and defensive patterns. "Analysis complete," Lieutenant Kim reported. "We found the weak points." Alina studied the data. The Vorthan fleet was powerful but rigid. Their formations were optimized for frontal assault. They expected their enemies to either charge directly at them or flee. They were not prepared for something different. "Signal the fleet," she said. "Execute Pattern Omega." Pattern Omega was humanity's secret weapon. It was not a formation or a tactic, but a philosophy. Instead of fighting as a unified fleet, the human ships suddenly scattered in all directions. They broke into small groups of 2 or 3, each acting independently but in coordination with the others. Zareth watched the maneuver with confusion. What are they doing? His tactical officer had no answer. The Vorthan trained to fight organized fleets, not swarms of gnats attacking from every direction. Their targeting systems struggled to track so many small groups. Their commanders received conflicting orders as they tried to respond to threats from multiple angles. The human ships struck like wolves hunting a larger prey. They attacked weak points in the Vorthan formation, hit hard, and then retreated before the enemy could respond. Each attack was small, but together they added up. One Vorthan cruiser exploded as 3 human destroyers concentrated fire on its weakened shields. Another lost its engines when a torpedo found the gap between its armor plates. The perfect geometric formation began to fragment as ships moved to protect themselves. "Incredible," James breathed, watching the battle unfold. "It is actually working." "Do not celebrate yet," Alina warned. "This is just the beginning." She was right. The Vorthan were experienced warriors. Zareth quickly realized what was happening and adapted. He ordered his fleet to form defensive clusters, protecting each other from the swarming attacks. The human advantage began to fade as the Vorthan adjusted. "Human casualties mounting," Lieutenant Kim reported. "We have lost 20 ships, 30, 40. Alina felt each loss like a physical blow. Each ship carried 100 souls, men and women with families and dreams. But she could not let grief paralyze her. Not now. "Maintain pressure," she ordered. "Keep them off balance." The battle raged for hours. The Vorthan's numerical advantage was slowly grinding down the human fleet, but at a terrible cost. For every human ship destroyed, they took 2 or 3 Vorthan with them. It was a rate of exchange that should have been impossible. Across the galaxy, other species watched the battle unfold. The Galactic Collective had expected a quick Vorthan victory, a brief lesson in the futility of resistance. Instead, they saw something they had never seen before. A small, young species was standing toe-to-toe with the most powerful military in known space, and they were not just surviving, they were fighting back. On 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and form watched their screens and wondered, if humans could do this, what did it mean for the galaxy? What did it mean for the Vorthan's iron grip on power? The seeds of change were being planted with every explosion, every act of defiance, every human ship that refused to surrender even as it burned. And at the center of it all stood Captain Alina Vasquez, leading her people through the darkness toward an uncertain dawn. 6 hours into the battle, the horizon took a direct hit. The impact threw Alina from her chair, alarms screaming as the ship shuddered around her. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red as damage reports flooded in. "Shields down to 30%, James shouted over the chaos. "Hull breach on decks 5 through 7. We have casualties." Alina pulled herself back into her chair, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "Seal those decks. Reroute power to shields. Keep us in the fight." Around them, the human fleet was struggling. They had destroyed nearly 500 Vorthan ships, but they had lost over 100 of their own. The mathematics of attrition were not in their favor. At this rate, They would be destroyed long before the Vorthan fleet was neutralized. "We need something new," Alina muttered, studying the tactical display. "Something they do not expect." The answer came from an unlikely source. Lieutenant Maria Santos, the ship's xenobiologist, rushed onto the bridge clutching a tablet. "Captain, I found something. In the Vorthan communication logs." "This is not the time for research," James snapped. "No, listen," Maria insisted. "The Vorthan ships are controlled by a networked command system. All their tactical decisions flow through the flagship. If we could somehow disrupt that connection." Alina's eyes widened. They would lose coordination. Their fleet would fall into chaos. "Exactly. But we would need to get close enough to the Eternal Dominion to transmit a disruption signal. Very close." Alina looked at the tactical display. The Vorthan flagship sat at the center of the enemy formation, protected by hundreds of ships. Getting close would be a suicide mission. "I will go," she said quietly. James grabbed her arm. "Alina, no, you are too important. Let someone else." "There is no one else. The Horizon is one of the few ships fast enough and tough enough to make it through, and the crew needs to see me leading from the front. That is how humans fight, together." She opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, I need a distraction. Hit the Vorthan flanks as hard as you can. Draw their attention away from the center. The Horizon is going for their flagship." The responses came back immediately. Ship after ship volunteered to support the attack. They knew it might mean their deaths, but not one hesitated. This was what they had trained for. This was why they had joined the fleet. "Helm, plot a course through the enemy formation. Navigation, find me the fastest route to that flagship. Engineering, I need everything you can give me. Every last bit of power." The crew moved with purpose, fear replaced by determination. They had followed Alina through a dozen difficult missions. They trusted her with their lives, and now they would prove that trust was not misplaced. The Horizon surged forward as the rest of the fleet launched their diversionary attack. Explosions lit up the flanks of the Vorthan formation as human ships struck with everything they had. For a moment, Vorthan attention shifted away from the center. Alina seized the opportunity, now full speed ahead. The Horizon dove into the enemy formation like a needle-piercing skin. Plasma bolts scorched past them, some striking home, but the ship kept moving. Shields flickered and failed. Hull plates buckled and tore, but still they pushed forward. On the Eternal Dominion, Zareth watched the human ships approach with something close to disbelief. "They are insane. They must know they cannot survive this charge." "All weapons target that ship," he ordered. "Destroy it before it reaches us." But the Horizon was too fast, too agile. It weaved through the fire, taking hits but refusing to stop. Alina gripped her chair as explosions rocked the ship. Crew members fell around her. Smoke filled the air, but she did not waver. "Distance to flagship," she demanded. 10,000 kilometers and closing," Lieutenant Kim reported, his voice strained. "Signal strength is increasing. We just need to get a little closer." A massive explosion threw Alina sideways. When she recovered, she saw that half the bridge was gone, open to the vacuum of space. Emergency force fields barely held. James lay unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. But the Horizon was still moving. 5,000 kilometers, someone shouted. Alina dragged herself to the communications console. Her hands were shaking, her vision blurred, but she found the switch she needed. "Transmitting disruption signal," she gasped. The effect was immediate. Across the Vorthan fleet, systems began to fail. The network that connected their ships collapsed. Commanders suddenly found themselves isolated, unable to receive orders or coordinate with their allies. The perfect formation dissolved into confusion. On the Eternal Dominion, Zareth felt true fear for the first time in his life. His tactical displays were blank. His communications were dead. The greatest fleet ever assembled was suddenly blind and deaf. "What have they done?" he whispered. The human fleet, sensing their opportunity, launched a coordinated assault. Ships that had been on the defensive suddenly went on the attack. They struck at the disorganized Vorthan vessels, exploiting the chaos that Alina had created. The tide of battle turned. What had been a losing fight became something else entirely. The Vorthan, unable to coordinate their defense, began to fall. Ship after ship was destroyed as the humans pressed their advantage. But Alina saw none of this. The horizon had taken too much damage. The ship was dying around her, systems failing one by one. She slumped against the console, too weak to move. "Captain," a voice called out. It was Lieutenant Kim, wounded but alive. "Captain, we did it. The signal worked. The fleet is winning." Alina managed a smile. Then it was worth it. Emergency ships were already racing toward the horizon. Across the battlefield, human vessels had formed a protective barrier around their fallen flagship. They would not let their captain die without a fight. The battle raged on for 3 more hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Without coordination, the Vorthan fleet could not mount an effective resistance. They fought bravely, individually, but they were no match for the unified human force. When Zareth finally ordered the retreat, less than half of his fleet remained. The mighty Armada that had expected easy conquest limped away in defeat, leaving behind the wreckage of 1,000 ships and the shattered remains of Vorthan pride. On Earth, people who had been watching the battle in terrified silence erupted in celebration. In cities around the world, crowds gathered to cheer, to cry, to embrace each other. Against all odds, humanity had survived. And across the galaxy, other species watched in wonder. The Vorthan had been defeated, not by a larger force, not by superior technology, but by courage, determination, and the unconquerable human spirit. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. Nothing would ever be the same again. Alina woke in a hospital bed on Earth 3 days later. The white ceiling above her was unfamiliar, and for a moment she did not know where she was. Then memory came flooding back, along with pain from wounds she had barely noticed during the battle. James sat in a chair beside her bed, his head bandaged but his eyes bright. When he saw her open her eyes, he leaned forward with a smile. "Welcome back, Captain. You had us worried." "The fleet," Alina whispered, her throat dry. "The Vorthan." "Gone, retreated. What is left of them is licking their wounds on the far side of the galaxy. You did it, Alina. You saved us all." She closed her eyes, relief washing over her. They had won. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that should have crushed them, humanity had survived. But she knew the victory had come at a terrible cost. "How many?" she asked quietly. James's smile faded. 147 ships lost, 12,000 crew members dead. The horizon is gone. They had to abandon her after they evacuated us. 12,000. The number hit Alina like a physical blow. 12,000 families who would never see their loved ones again. 12,000 futures cut short. She had led those people into battle. Their deaths were on her hands. "Hey," James said softly, reading her expression. "Do not do that to yourself. You made the hard choice so the rest of us would not have to. 8 billion people are alive because of what you did. Do not forget that." Alina nodded, but the weight of command still pressed down on her. It would always be there, she knew. The burden of leadership did not lift just because the battle was won. Over the next few weeks, as Alina recovered, the full impact of humanity's victory became clear. The Galactic Collective, which had stood aside during the battle, was now eager to embrace Earth as a full partner. Species that had feared the Vorthan for millennia suddenly saw new possibilities. Delegates from dozens of worlds arrived on Earth, seeking alliances, offering friendship, asking questions. How had humans done it? What was their secret? How could they stand against such overwhelming force? Alina found herself at the center of it all. The collective requested her presence at their council, asking her to speak about the battle and humanity's future in the galaxy. She accepted, despite still recovering from her injuries. The council chamber was a vast sphere floating in space, a neutral meeting place where representatives of every spacefaring species could gather. When Alina entered, supported by a cane she still needed, she found herself facing hundreds of alien faces, all watching her with intense curiosity. The council speaker, a being of living crystal called Thex, opened the session. "Captain Vasquez, we have asked you here to help us understand what happened. The Vorthan Empire has never been defeated in battle, yet you, leading a force vastly inferior in numbers and technology, achieved a victory that has reshaped the galaxy. How?" Alina looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species she recognized and many she did not. She thought carefully about her answer. "You want to know our secret," she began, "but I am not sure you will understand it. Humans are not special because of our technology or our numbers. We are special because of what we believe." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "We believe that every life has value. That freedom is worth fighting for. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. The Vorthan believe in power and control. They see the universe as something to be dominated. We see it as something to be explored, cherished, and protected." A murmur ran through the chamber. These were not the tactical secrets the delegates had expected. "The Vorthan expected us to surrender because that is what logic demanded," Alina continued. "They could not understand why we would fight when defeat seemed certain, but humans have never let certainty stop us. We climbed mountains that could not be climbed, crossed oceans that could not be crossed, and walked on worlds that could not support life. We did not do these things because they were possible. We did them because they were impossible." She stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. "You asked what we have that the Vorthan do not. It is simple. We have hope. We have love. We have the willingness to sacrifice everything for what we believe in. These are not weaknesses. They are our greatest strengths. They make us fight harder, think faster, and never, ever give up." The chamber fell silent. Alina could feel the weight of hundreds of gazes upon her. The Vorthan ruled through fear because they believed fear was the strongest force in the universe. But they were wrong. Love is stronger. Hope is stronger. The determination to protect those we care about is stronger. That is what beat them. Not weapons, not tactics, but the unconquerable human spirit. Thex spoke again, their crystalline form pulsing with light. "What do you suggest for the future? The Vorthan will not accept this defeat. They will return." "Yes, they will," Alina agreed. "But they do not have to face us alone. The collective watched from the sidelines while humanity fought for survival. You were afraid to act, afraid of what you might lose. I understand that fear, but fear is not a strategy. It is a prison." She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. "Humanity stands ready to defend not just Earth, but any world that values freedom and peace. We offer our alliance to anyone who shares our beliefs. Not an empire built on conquest, but a partnership built on mutual respect. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We want to live in it, alongside all of you, as equals." The reaction was immediate. Delegates began talking among themselves, some in languages Alina did not understand, but the energy in the room was unmistakable. Something had changed. The fear that had paralyzed the collective for so long was beginning to crack. A delegate from a species called the Farish rose to speak. They were small beings, no larger than human children, who lived in the shadow of Vorthan space. "For generations my people have lived in fear," they said, their voice trembling. "We accepted Vorthan rule because we thought we had no choice, but watching humanity fight, watching you refuse to surrender even when hope seemed lost, it awakened something in us, something we thought was dead." The Farish turned to Alina, and she saw tears in their strange, multifaceted eyes. "You gave us back our courage. My world accepts your alliance. Whatever comes next, we will face it together. One by one, other delegates rose to make similar declarations. Species that had never challenged the Vorthen, who had accepted their place in the hierarchy without question, now stood to join humanity's cause. Alina watched in wonder as the alliance she had proposed became reality. She had hoped to inspire, to plant seeds of change. She had not expected them to bloom so quickly. By the end of the session, 37 worlds had pledged their support. It was a small fraction of the galaxy, but it was a beginning, the foundation of something new. As Alina left the council chamber, Thex approached her. "You have started something that cannot be stopped," they said. "The galaxy will never be the same." "That is the idea," Alina replied with a tired smile. "Humanity did not come to the stars to fit in. We came to make things better. The Vorthen will not take this lightly. More conflict is coming." "I know, but this time we will not face it alone, and that makes all the difference." 5 years passed after the Battle of Earth. In that time, the galaxy transformed in ways that no one had predicted. The alliance that Alina had proposed grew from 37 worlds to over 200. Species that had never communicated before found common ground in their shared desire for freedom and peace. Earth became the heart of this new coalition. Its cities hosted embassies from dozens of worlds. Its universities taught students of every species. Its shipyards built vessels that carried crews of mixed races, working together in ways that would have seemed impossible a decade before. Alina, now Admiral Vasquez, oversaw the coalition's military forces from a new flagship, the UES Unity. It was a ship built by human hands but incorporating technology from a dozen different species, a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. But she knew that peace was fragile. The Vorthen had spent 5 years rebuilding, recovering from their defeat. Intelligence reports suggested they were planning something. The question was not if they would strike again, but when. The answer came on a quiet morning in spring. Alina was in her office when James, now her second in command once again, rushed in with urgent news. "The Vorthen have mobilized," he said. "Their entire fleet. They are heading for Farish space." The Farish, the small species who had been first to join Earth's alliance. Zareth was sending a message. He would crush humanity's allies one by one, isolating Earth before the final blow. Alina stood immediately. How long until they reach the Farish homeworld? 72 hours. Then we have 72 hours to get there first. She activated her comm. "All coalition ships, emergency mobilization. We are going to war." The response was overwhelming. Ships from across the alliance began converging on the Farish system. Human vessels flew alongside Farish scouts, crystalline Thex cruisers, and massive transports from a dozen other species. It was the largest combined fleet ever assembled, and it was racing to beat the Vorthen to their target. On the Unity's bridge, Alina watched the fleet form up around her. There was something beautiful about it. Beings from across the galaxy, united not by force but by choice, fighting not for conquest but for protection. This was what she had dreamed of. This was what 12,000 human sailors had died for. "Fleet status," she requested. 800 ships and counting, James reported. "More are joining every hour. We will have over 1,000 by the time we reach Farish space." "The Vorthen are bringing 3,000. "Yes, but this time they are fighting all of us." The fleets met in orbit around the Farish homeworld. It was a green planet, covered in forests and rivers, home to 3 billion gentle beings who had never known war. They watched from their cities as the sky filled with ships, praying that the alliance they had joined would protect them. Zareth, once again commanding from the Eternal Dominion, surveyed the enemy fleet with contempt. "They have gathered more ships, but they are still outnumbered. Their collection of weaklings cannot stand against Vorthen might." He opened a channel to the coalition fleet. "Captain Vasquez, we meet again. I see you have assembled quite a gathering. It will make your defeat all the more satisfying." Alina's face appeared on his view screen. She looked older than she had 5 years ago, harder, but her eyes still held that same defiant fire. "It is Admiral now," she replied calmly, "and you have made a mistake coming here. Last time you faced humanity alone. This time you face the galaxy. A galaxy of cowards who hid behind you. They will scatter the moment we attack. You do not know them the way I do. You see weakness where I see strength. You see fear where I see courage waiting to bloom. These beings have chosen to stand with us. They will not run." Zareth laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Then they will die with you. All ships attack." The Vorthan fleet surged forward. 3,000 ships, bristling with weapons, confident in their superiority. They had conquered 100 worlds. They knew no defeat except the one humanity had inflicted, and they were eager for revenge. "All ships engage," Alina ordered. "Show them what unity looks like." The coalition fleet moved as one. Human ships led the charge, their crews veterans of the first battle. Fairish scouts darted through the chaos, too small and fast to hit. Thex cruisers formed a crystalline barrier, their unique shields absorbing Vorthan fire. Species that had never fought together coordinated like they had trained for years. Because they had. In the 5 years since the Alliance formed, humanity had shared everything it knew about warfare. Tactics, strategies, the hard-won lessons of centuries of conflict. They had trained together, learned to communicate across species barriers, built trust through shared struggle. The Vorthan expected their enemies to fight as individuals, to break apart under pressure. Instead, they found a unified force that adapted to every attack, that covered each other's weaknesses, that refused to give ground. Zareth watched in growing frustration as his superior numbers failed to produce results. "They fight like one creature," he muttered. "How is this possible?" The answer was something he could never understand. Love, trust. The bonds formed between beings who had chosen to stand together. These were not weaknesses. They were the strongest force in the universe. The battle raged for hours. Ships fell on both sides, but the coalition held, more than held. Slowly, inexorably, they began to push the Vorthan back. Alina led from the front, the unity cutting through enemy lines like a scalpel. She thought of all the lives that had been lost to bring them to this moment. All the sacrifice, all the pain. It would not be for nothing. "Signal from the Vorthan flagship," James reported. "They want to negotiate." Alina nodded. "Put them through." Zareth's face appeared on screen. He looked different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something Alina had never expected to see: uncertainty. "You have proven your point," he said stiffly. "The Vorthan are prepared to discuss terms." "There is only one term," Alina replied. "Peace. True peace, not surrender but partnership. The Vorthan can join the coalition or stand apart, but the age of conquest is over. The galaxy has changed. It is time for you to change with it." A long silence followed. Zareth struggled with concepts that went against everything his species believed. Power, control, dominance. These were the foundations of Vorthan civilization. Could they be rebuilt on different principles? "And if we refuse," he asked. "Then we continue fighting until one side can fight no more. But that path leads only to destruction. Yours, ours, everyone's. I am offering you something better. A future where strength is measured not by the worlds you conquer but by the lives you protect." Zareth closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had shifted. "The Vorthan will. Consider your offer. We will withdraw and discuss among ourselves. That is all I ask. Take the time you need. We will be waiting." The Vorthan fleet withdrew. Not in defeat this time, but in contemplation. The battle was over, and with it, perhaps, an era. On the fairish homeworld, billions of beings looked up at the sky and celebrated. Their protectors had come. The Alliance had held. They were safe. Elena stood on the bridge of the Unity, surrounded by officers from a dozen different species. They had done it, not alone but together, the way it should always be. "What now?" James asked, standing beside her. Elena smiled, genuine and warm. "Now we build, we heal. We show the galaxy what happens when beings choose cooperation over conflict. It will not be easy. There will be challenges, setbacks, moments when everything seems hopeless. But that is what humans do. We face the impossible and we find a way." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "We came to the stars looking for answers. We found something better. We found friends. We found purpose. And we found out that the universe is not a hostile place to be conquered but a community to be joined. Today, we took another step on that journey. Tomorrow, we take another. And we keep going together until the last star burns out." Outside the viewport, the combined fleet hung in space, a tapestry of different designs united by common purpose. Human ships flew alongside vessels that would have seemed impossibly alien just 20 years before. Now they were family. The battle for universal balance was not won in a single fight or a single moment. It was won in choices made every day. The choice to extend trust instead of suspicion. The choice to offer friendship instead of dominance. The choice to believe in something bigger than oneself. Humanity had come to the stars carrying all their flaws and all their strengths. They had found a galaxy that needed both. And in leading the way to a better future, they had discovered the greatest truth of all. The universe was vast and terrifying and wonderful, and it was better with humans in it. Admiral Elena Vasquez looked at the stars and smiled. This was what they had fought for. This was what they had sacrificed for. Not victory, not power, but this. A future where anything was possible. A future where the next generation would not have to fight the battles of the past. A future written in hope instead of fear. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, and it was only the beginning.